Episode 18 with Amanda Slavin. Welcome to Barnraisers. It's so great to be here today. I know this episode is way overdue, and it's been a little while since our last show. But as I said recently on social media, sometimes life does just happen. It's been a rough couple of weeks for our extended family, with a couple of our closest friends dealing with the loss of loved ones. It's always a sad and hard time. But I do feel very grateful to have been in a position where I got to take a little time out to say some goodbyes and to support some friends and family through some really tough times. Not everyone gets that chance, and for that, I am thankful. And for all your support, well wishes, and understanding, I also want to say thank you. It's very much appreciated. There's a chance that you may never heard the name Amanda Slavin, but I would be willing to bet that you've seen her work or in some way have felt the effects of the collaboration she's been a part of. She's been responsible and associated with many wonderful community-based projects, including the Charity Connector, where she worked with over 200 non-profits, supporting them in their fundraising efforts. And she was one of the producers for the Global Poverty Project's Global Festival, the 60,000 person concert in Central Park, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. About 5 years ago, Amanda started her current business, an experiential marketing agency called CatalystCreativ. CatalystCreativ is focused on helping cities, brands, and institutions flourish by developing educational and inspirational experiences. Amanda and the incredible CatalystCreativ team have worked with brands such as Dell, PayPal, Nestle, and Google. They also work behind the scenes to help maximise the reach and engagement for some of the world's largest music festivals and events, including Life is Beautiful and the Global Citizen Festival. If you have an interest in building a community, bringing people together, or garnering support and engagement for your biggest, boldest, and most beneficial ideas, then I know of no one better than Amanda to guide you along the way. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce the one and only Amanda Slavin. To begin with is that you're known for coordinating and collaborating wonderful events, tremendous festivals and parties and things like that. Do you still like attending them?
That's a funny question. I once said it's once you get into events and you see kind of the back end of the experience, it's like seeing Mickey Mouse with his head off. Like you kind of know the behind the scenes. And I was also in the hospitality industry, so very much with restaurants as well. But I think I like attending experiences, generally speaking, more when I'm actually working them. So it's really hard for me to, unless it's something like Disney World, like unless it's something that's so iconic and has been around for so long and it allows for me to be in a completely different perspective. But if it is something like, if it is even a realm of a client for me or a partner for me, if I am attending but not working, it really feels off. So I generally nowadays really kind of spend my time with, very small moments with close friends and with my dog and with my fiance when I have time, because so much of going to experiences is for work. But again, I think it's really based on the actual experience. And I think there are still certain circumstances that take me out of my element.
Do you celebrate your birthday with a birthday party every year?
I used to, and I really made it a part of my work because I'm a partner in a bunch of different restaurants, and I would always throw the party at a restaurant in order to be able to really have it kind of be, again, like a dual purpose. So one to celebrate and one to then help with the properties. And so after I transitioned out of that hospitality position, I really have tried over the past few years actually to not throw a party for my birthday anymore. So now I have like very, very small moments where I will celebrate with one friend or just with my fiance or kind of go away and travel. But no, I do not throw. And I'm actually in the process of even planning my wedding, which I'm keeping unbelievably small and intimate, just because, again, it will feel like work if I do it in a way that doesn't feel 100% authentic to me.
Yeah, I can understand that. You sound like a bit like those rock stars that the big events in the arenas and stuff. I would rather play the intimate venues and things like that. That's the vibe I'm getting. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge part of me for so long that I've always had huge birthday parties and always kind of invited every single person that I know. And then when I transitioned that to college, and I threw parties all throughout college, and then I left college and studied abroad and did the same thing, and then went to New York and did the same thing. And so again, it's really important for me that in my spare time, I just make sure to take the time that I need in order to get to know like myself within those moments, because I am constantly within a workplace, and work is such a huge part of my life. Getting to know so many other people and being a part of large groups. So like in those small moments in between, it's important that I go inward instead of kind of bunching up even more experiences into those moments.
So let's talk about, you've talked a little bit about your background and stuff, and I want to get into that. But the question I want to ask you is, what was the moment of discovery that you had when you knew that what you loved, you knew that what you were doing was what you loved, and that's what you wanted to pursue?
Well, there was probably a few during my career, but the time that I probably, in terms of a moment with CatalystCreativ, I started CatalystCreativ 5 years ago, and we created these experiences every month in downtown Vegas where we would bring speakers from all over the world to come and give free talks and workshops to the public. And one of those talks was Simon Sinek, and he was speaking in a construction trailer. And Simon Sinek is, a large kind of scale speaker and author, marketer. And it was an amazing moment for me because I saw like the room completely filled with all of these people that were so inspired by him in a construction trailer. And he, who usually charges quite a bit of money to speak, was speaking for free to these individuals. And it really showed me that this idea of designing experiences, leveraging my background in education could work. And that it really could impact people's lives. And so that was one of the moments where I really felt like I absolutely was doing what I was supposed to be doing and what I love to do.
But are you still doing Catalyst Creatives, or have you moved on from those?
So the Catalyst Weeks and the Creative Weeks were for 2.5 years, and we're not really doing those experiences anymore. We transitioned to kind of larger experiences with clients all over the country. So now we do internal experiences for clients. We do external experiences. In terms of events, we do digital experiences, so social media. But the Catalyst and Creative Weeks were for 2.5 years. It was every month, twice a month, 50 people per event. So I don't think anyone could really do that for more than 2.5 years. It was quite a bit of work, but it was pretty amazing. Yeah,
I'd imagine it would be. Geez, that would just be a nonstop carousel.
It really was. And it was so wonderful because we met so many incredible people. And that's actually what snowballed the company into being able to be a full service agency, because people would attend our events and then say, how can you help us do this with our brand? And how can you help tell our story in an inspirational way? And the same kind of experience, because so many people left those experiences saying that their lives were changed, or they met their business partner, or they met their husband, or it was just a really beautiful opportunity to tell a story of a burgeoning city in a unique way.
Yeah. Watching it from afar, it was brilliant to watch and understand. I think the first time I came into contact with you and found out about Creative Week and all that stuff was when you appeared on Rich Roll's podcast, and you did a podcast with Rich. So
yes, awesome. I love that. Rich is so great. And he attended a Catalyst Week, and then Julie, his wife, attended a Creative Week. And then Julie and their kids actually performed at a Creative Week, and then Rich spoke at Life is Beautiful. So like we call it, instead of return on investment for ROI, we call it ripple of impact. So all these moments, starting with just one moment, how it ripples out into all these other moments with these amazing people. So that's pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It is. Absolutely. And I think that's where we're sort of heading in terms of what I wanted to discuss next, which is this idea that you really did in that scenario and in that environment, you build a community. And obviously you were building with people, so you're working in teams. So the question I wanted to start off with then is, what's the difference between a community and a team in your eyes, and is there one?
I think, I a long time ago wrote an article that was crowd versus community. And it was this kind of conversation around the difference between what it looks like to just have a bunch of people together and a community. And I would say that, I think the word team has a little bit of weight on it in the fact that it should be treated as a community. And what I think defines a community, it's that word is now used so often, but it's extremely difficult to be able to create a safe space where people feel like they can share who they are, what they believe in, a difference of opinion, have this opportunity to be able to talk to each other in a way that allows for each person to understand different perspectives. And I think that the community is actually a safe space to be able to shape the world that we live in. And I think that a team is similar in the way that, again, a team is guided towards a common goal. But I think that if you want to really have an impactful team, you have to have a semblance of community in order to be able to have people feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves and they have a role in shaping the world that they're a part of, as opposed to just, you're my team and this is what you're going to do and whatever I say goes. I don't think that really, equates to community.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And I think that's symptomatic of what I see in the work that I'm doing. And we call that a top-down approach to team versus a bottom-up approach, which is more the community space, where you're sort of saying, guys, there's a role you're here for, and you guys need to play an active role in that to actually build a culture of your own within the business or within the group to make that work.
Absolutely. And it's funny you said active, because that's why we actually call the company CatalystCreativ, because it's around this idea of turning passive individuals into active participants in their own lives, in the lives of others, in the world. And so that's exactly right.
Cool. Now that means we're going to be here talking all day. You know that, don't you?
For sure.
So I'm interested then in the idea of culture then and what you set out to do, because the way you guys do it is phenomenal. We'll touch on some of the events like A Life is Beautiful in a moment or a bit later on, but how easy is it to start? I mean, you think about starting a team and then people sort of get a bit freaked out about that. There's people I've got to pull in. We've got to get people together. The mindset shifts. But I think when you approach it from that sense that you talked about, which is bottom up and starting with a real sense of we're trying to build a community here, I think the impact is greater. But I think there's a different feel to it and a different mindset. So what's the mindset going into starting a community when you start working with a client, for instance?
So as I mentioned, my background, I have a background in master's and curriculum and instruction, and I was a teacher. And when I, every single morning during class, I would ask every single student in the room, before we kind of started the day, to talk about whatever they wanted on their minds for 1 minute each. And these were 6-year-olds, and they all kind of went around and shared these very defining moments of their lives and days. And it really informed the conversation that we would then have later in that day. And I was able to then use information from one child's story to support what another child was going through. And I think that when working with companies, it's similar in that regard, that before identifying a marketing tactic or a strategy to be able to, communicate to the world, it's really important that internal teams feel heard and seen, and that all the work that they're doing is not in vain. So it's very important for us to be able to build that trust with internal teams. And we actually, we have a workshop prior to developing marketing tactics, which is called the Brand Acupuncturist Workshop. And it's this idea of identifying pain points and coming up with solutions that will then inform creative. And so again, sometimes we're in rooms with clients and it's really important for us to just make sure that they know that we're there to support them, and whatever problems that they end up facing, we will develop solutions with them, but we're not coming in to solve everything and not necessarily make room for all of the experiences and the opinions and the perspectives of those individuals. So I think when developing community from an external perspective, any community that is a marketing campaign or a physical experience, you have to really start with building community internally. And a lot of clients, it's really important that we do that with clients. And some clients say, we don't have the time. And then we really have to push back and say, this is 100% necessary in order for you to feel good about the work and for us to feel good about the work. So it's something that we're now more confident about really putting up front.
Yeah, I can understand that completely. And there is no real good time for this stuff. There's no a perfect time or one time's better than the other, is there? I mean, when you start working with a team at the levels you're doing, the time is now or it's going to be later on, but the time is always, it's never going to be the exact right moment to start taking into account some of this stuff.
Yes. And I think a lot of people, I kind of say it's like crap cake, like this idea of that, a lot of brands think that they can just do really interesting, glossy marketing campaigns and it can cover up the internal crap that's sitting within their organization. And I think that it's really important to allow for that to come to the surface and for organizations to look at themselves first and then say, okay, what are we doing that we can improve within our own small community? And then how can we then take that knowledge and spread it to a larger community? But again, so often I think people think that there's a way to do it the opposite way. And I don't think that that's sustainable.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I agree. And I think that comes out of sort of the old school thinking of, hierarchy and the vision comes from the top and then it filters downwards. And again, it's this idea of bottom up and top down. But there's essentially, I think, two cultures in any business. There's the corporate one like you're talking about, the one that you plaster all over the walls and the aspirational stuff that you want to do. But then there's the nuts and bolts that you can't hide, you can't paper over. And that's the way that the guys work together, or the girls and guys work together, I should say, every day. The way that those teams come together and actually operate on a day-to-day basis on the ground.
Yes. And it's funny because which we can talk about in detail, but we operate from this corporate infrastructure called Holacracy, which is all around accountabilities and roles, and there's no hierarchy. It's all based on circles, which is a larger conversation, but we really kind of walk the walk in making sure that we have a place where everyone can be heard and can change the organization in real time, as opposed to having kind of like this rigid infrastructure that doesn't allow for the people working within the company every single day to have a role in where the company is going. So that's something that we really believe in.
So that's something that you're doing internally at Catalyst, is that right?
Yes. So my business partner is Tony Shea, and he is the CEO of Zappos, and he's doing something within Zappos that's all around self-organization. And he helped fund the initiative where he essentially invested in this program called Holacracy for Catalyst. And that was 3 years ago. So we've been doing Holacracy for 3 years, and it just really transformed the organization completely, and has allowed for us to have this infrastructure that isn't really focused on a top-down approach, but more so, I don't even know if it's bottom up because there's no bottom. It's more like, again, based on circles. So it's a lot of different people within the organization being able to develop solutions for the problems that they actually see.
Which is the critical piece. That's what everyone's trying to do.
Yeah. And I think, for a CEO, it's really important. I have been talking a lot about this kind of new approach to business around kind of embracing the feminine qualities instead of the masculine, and that workplace has become such a place of masculinity, and we have to, as women and men, embrace our feminine sides. And like one of those traits is surrendering. And I think a lot of CEOs and leaders and anyone in a leadership position, it's very difficult to surrender. You feel like it's all on you, and there's so much pressure, and you need to make the decisions in order to build success. And there's this piece for Holacracy where, you could really surrender to the individuals around you and allow for them to be able to guide you within the process, as opposed to thinking that you have all the answers.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand that completely. And I think you see that every time when you walk into some of these larger organizations as well. How do they, I'm interested in the language there, surrender. When I hear you say that, I sort you can sort of bristle up a bit. It's sort of like you're giving something away, and I think there's that that sort of feeling. You can see it written over people. You're laughing because I can see the picture talking to people, going, I can see it written on your face. You think you're handing over the keys to the business because I'm going to ask the team a single question. It's sort of like, come on. So I tend to talk about acceptance. Is that what you're talking about? It's similar sort of thing, surrender or acceptance of what's going to come and that it's going to be okay.
Yes. And with Holacracy, the way it works is there's something called governance, where anyone within the organization can bring up attention, and attention is where the company is versus where the company could be. And they could bring up a proposal that actually implements how to solve that tension. And so anyone in the organization is allowed to be able to start a proposal. And that is what I mean by surrendering, in the sense that most leaders do not feel comfortable with giving up control, and really actually recognizing that the people within the organization doing the work day to day might know even more about the organization than the leader, because they're the ones, again, on the ground. And so that idea of surrendering to the people that are, really, again, working, making the decisions, is so hard for so many leaders, particularly founders. I mean, I know as a founder, it has been extremely difficult for me to let go of like this baby that I've created. But over the past few years, it's by having this infrastructure that allows for anyone in the organization to develop solutions and really move the organization forward in a completely different way. It's giving me a lot of, giving me a lot of relaxation almost around the fact that, no, I do not have control. So it is that acceptance. But the second piece is surrendering to the fact that there are people in the organization that have great ideas, and that it's not on me. It's not all on me.
Yeah. And it can't be for the good of you, because that obviously, as you know, is not sustainable.
I think it's so interesting, because deep down we know that, but it is so difficult because, again, you want to protect this beautiful, I was just talking to a friend of mine who's another founder. And I was saying how so often founders develop something that they need to heal. So something that they feel is great for the world, but in reality is actually something that they need. And then the work of the founder is to do the work on themselves so that they don't get in the way of it serving a larger purpose for the world. And, I think that so often founders, even though they know truly, and founders, entrepreneurs, leaders, anything, they know that it isn't sustainable for them to be able to make all the decisions, but it really feels like then they have less value. And so it's really kind of grappling with the fact that you're not in this alone, but also that you can let go a little bit, and it's going to be okay. And you're going to still play a role, but it's not all about you and the decisions that you're making. Yeah.
And I think for founders, the reason for that, and you tell me, because I'm gonna sort of stick with this point, but the idea is, if you've created a method of, for instance, creating experiences for people, and you've come up with a model for how you want your business to look and run, and you're giving presentations based on your own thoughts and intellect and your original thinking, if you like, using the word original loosely, but if you're using your own original thinking, the idea that you're going to go and, first of all, share that with someone can be confronting enough. But then the idea that someone can reject that, and you somehow have to detach your identity within those thoughts that you've shared to the fact that the person that rejects that or isn't agreeing with you, it then becomes that sort of thing. Is it me or is it my ideas? But they're both the same person. So how did you get to that point, and how did your mindset shift in that transition?
Well, I think, when I was in the hospitality industry, I ended up becoming fairly, I really became, and I use the word masculine because we all have masculine and feminine traits, but I use the word masculine in the sense of kind of like traditionally masculine, because that's what I felt was needed within a business setting. So kind of very harsh and hard and stiff and really kind of aggressive in the sense of just an assertive and making sure that I was the boss. And that really didn't feel, again, before that I was a teacher, so that didn't really feel fitting to me. It felt a little bit off, and it didn't feel of my nature. And so then when I started Catalyst, and I really started to see what, because then it was my environment and my ecosystem that I was able to develop with the team that was a part of Catalyst. And the people that actually were the, first few individuals one has been my best friend for 8 years, and the other one went to college with me. So, these two individuals really knew me as a person and could really stand for me to be something more than what I think I thought I had to be. And so in those moments, they were also willing to take risks, and I trusted them. So I was able to listen to them, and they trusted and respected me. So we had this initial, kind of ecosystem and petri dish where we could create mutual respect and agreement, and really have a safe space for each of us to share what we thought about the company. And then as we started adding more people, we really had to kind of figure out how to continue that, but it was fairly difficult. And so when Holacracy was introduced, it was something that quickly kind of drew a line in the sand. There were some people in the organization that felt really threatened by Holacracy because they got their power from kind of making other people feel below them. Mm-hmm. And it was a very easy way to distinguish that they weren't the right fit for the organization, and they soon transitioned out. And the people that were left really built this company around this opportunity to actually have these very hard conversations. And for me, because sometimes attention involves me, sometimes someone will bring up a proposal that has to do with changing the way that I'm used to working. But that is the culture and the environment that I wanted to set up and that I actually felt would be the most sustainable. And, again, it really started from a mutual trust and respect with people that I started the company with. And then it's really has now expanded because of the infrastructure of Holacracy. But just to answer that second question of how does it make me feel and how did I kind of learn to be able to deal with it in this way, in this healthy way, yeah. I think it's just like in the beginning, it was really hard and it was challenging and it felt really uncomfortable. But the more I just did it. I just kept doing it. I kept, really softening myself and making sure that's those feminine traits that I keep talking about, but like embracing my vulnerable side and being able to recognize that if I felt like there was some sense of failure, I would share that with the team because that's what I wanted from them. And, being compassionate and empathetic because again, that's what I wanted from them. And it also came from, 2 years of building the organization prior to actually having Holacracy. And even though I had this beautiful group of people that I trusted and respected, I still felt very lonely. And so I needed to create opportunities for me to also feel seen and heard. And I felt that would be the best way to do so.
Right. And what was the practice then that went into that? I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, and that's a massive amount of work to be done. I mean, it sounds so easy when you answer it in a question in like 30 seconds, but that's dealing with a whole lot of stuff that you're trying to shift. It's not like it's not there. You're trying to add something that's not already there. You're trying to extract different parts and sort of rebalance yourself in that petri dish, as you said before. So what was some of the practices? Can you share those that you actually did that helped with that?
Yeah. So I think, I guess it's twofold because it's what really changed the organization and what changed me. So within the organization, one simple practice that started to kind of shift the way that we all think. We all work all over the country. And so we're all not in one office, was just a general check-in every single week during our first meeting of the week. And being able to have this conversation where we all checked in with each other and we all talked similarly to what I did in my first grade classroom. And we all talked about whatever we wanted during that check-in. It wasn't just about work. It could be about personal life. It could be about something actually going on that's inhibiting you from being your best self within work. And it was really this open space for us to be able to have these conversations. So that was one major thing. The other thing in terms of practices as an individual is I started to really invest in myself. So my MO is to just work myself to pretty much obliteration. I'm a workaholic. I love to work. But I started to really create boundaries. So, I try to not work past 7 p.m. every night, shut my phone off. I really try to, when I'm on vacation, to completely shut off because it's not fair to the rest of the team because then they never feel like they can take a vacation. And so I actually need to shut off to respect their boundaries that they need and that they want. And then I also, I now meditate twice a day, which is unbelievably important for me. And I make sure that I'm taking time to, walk 10,000 steps a day, which seems so simple, but it's also meaning that I'm giving myself the actual time that I need to put into myself. And then I also have a therapist and I have a life coach and I've given myself so kind of a full support system to be able to keep me intact so that I can then really show up as my best self to the organization. So I think, again, that first piece and it's a constant struggle for me. And I think the pendulum swings to both sides, but this idea of just making sure that whatever I need to feel good is unbelievably important for me feeling to show up in the organization. And the second is, again, that idea, that quick little snippet of like checking in with each other. But this culture, we've really developed this culture through, yes, check-ins, but also not being afraid to hear feedback and criticism really productive criticism, all of the time, and creating this culture. And again, holacracy is a little bit complex, but I'm happy to explain it down the road of this conversation. But it is a culture where at any given point of time, someone can draw attention to something that's going on in the organization that they feel could be better. And by creating that culture, it's actually allowed for people all of the time to bring up things that could be better. And it's really all around, how do you move the company forward? So instead of people complaining to each other, it's really around what can make the organization better, as opposed to, I'm frustrated by this, but have no solution. So I think, again, small little changes within the organization, but even more so, bigger changes within yourself, and investing in yourself as an individual is the first step.
Yeah. Fantastic answer. That's so true. And in my experience, it's exactly the same sort of thing. And that's one of the things we do in our workshops. It's not so much how the team's going to operate and what are we going to adopt as a new culture, but we weave that in with the personal work over a few days and say, listen, we can do all the work we like on the team, but it's who we have to become in order to live that now. So if we don't address some of these personal things, and we don't sort of get into a little bit of work on ourselves to realize whatever we need to, then something's going to be missing, and we're going to be misfiring because we just haven't done the work on ourselves. So you've got to look at that.
Yes, 100%.
Critically important. So, and I think you're right. That starts with that little meeting, and it sounds so simple, like your sixth graders meeting, and sort of talk about whatever you want. I think that's the birthplace of everything that you're sort of talking about, and we'll get into holacracy for sure. But one question that I've got, and this is what I encounter all the time. I don't know if you guys do it, but I go in, I can observe meetings of team meetings and things like that. And people will say, all right, anyone got anything to add? And that's their way of asking that question about everyone can talk. But then everyone you go around the room, one person might say something, the next two go, nothing from me, nothing from me. So I'm interested, how do you deal with that? Because I know you wouldn't let that happen, but you would, but how do you deal with that?
Well, so within, our workshops are really to inform marketing, but it really ends up bringing out things within the organization that, it can really help us to inform any type of strategy or tactic that we implement. And so, the questions that we ask all the time, we always say every single person in the room, has to answer. And we usually have the boss go last, so that everyone's not just saying what they need to say to kind of appease the, highest level person in the room.
Yep.
And we have had experiences and moments, and it's the types of questions that we ask, and this is again with clients, but I'll also explain within our own company. Yeah. But with clients, it's so important that even if, there's never a world in which you have nothing to say. So as a teacher, what I would then say to those individuals is you can say anything in this moment. Like, first of all, I guess the way that it's phrased is, do you have anything to add, is already giving people an uncomfortable situation, because maybe they don't feel like they have anything that's valuable to add, but they still have something to say. Right. And so by framing in a way that makes them feel like, oh, well, if I don't have anything to add that's valuable, then I just shouldn't say anything. Yep. That's not the point. The point is to have them feel heard and seen. And so within our organization, those check-ins are really not about anything other than just getting to know each other more. And we also have a learning we do a book club, and we all read a book, and then after we do one a quarter, so it doesn't feel like too much pressure. And then we just have a conversation where we all talk about our books and what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, and what we can learn. It's not all the same book. You could read any single book, but we found that also allowed for us to be able to have these open conversations where we could just feel seen and heard. And that's also, we have retreats. We try to do them once a quarter as well, where we all get together and just work in the same room for, 3 days. And we get to know each other, and we go out to dinner together, and we really try to know each other as people. And I think that is the major piece when doing any type of workshop or any type of event or experience, and again, even when thinking about a digital experience, being able to make sure that that's the human understanding, is that, I am seen, I am heard, I am understood. And so creating that space and saying, okay, I understand that you might not think that you have anything to add, but in order to be a part of this conversation, I want you to say anything. So even if you're like hungry and that's what you want to add, or you feel like you've been distracted all day because something's going on at home or whatever it is, by you providing your voice to this conversation, it's going to help the company. And so that's what I'm looking from you, not necessarily you trying to prove something to me. And I think in those types of environments, when people feel like they can just be themselves, you'll end up getting a lot more out of them because they don't feel like they have to be something that they're not.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that and that's so important. I mean, without that, you look at the opposite side of that and you say, well, what happens if we keep going the way we're going, or we keep doing what we're doing? Then how does the road grow from there? Like it just starts to shut down, and then people start to get self-conscious, and you can see how that happens. But I think that's why before people go, everyone in business loves to go into these things with these grand plans and the end vision in mind. But I think what you've just illustrated there is those first couple of simple steps. If you can't do those simple steps and have everyone be willing to contribute to a conversation, for instance, then the bigger things that are going to come up later on just aren't going to happen.
Oh, yeah. And if they can't even, if that's, again, it's all how you frame it. So if people are pretending to be something that they're not, and in that moment, again, do you have something to add? That is a yes or no question.
Yep.
So, it's more so asking people questions that allow for them to actually express themselves. But even if you ask all the right questions and you don't have the right ecosystem and environment set, people still won't feel like, that they trust the system enough to be able to share who they are. So this is like a macro conversation, which I love. Like I could talk about this for 3 hours.
Yeah.
But again, I think it really comes down to the leader. It's like really, again, it's this idea of, being able to show the qualities that you want out of a team by being the first person to go first. And I think in that regard, it's, if you want to have team members that are willing to share and to be honest and to be open, then you have to be honest and to be open. Mm-hmm. And if you want colleagues to be considerate and caring and respectful and empathetic of the organization, then you need to be that way towards them. And I think so often we think, okay, well, we're going to make this person better and then the company is going to be better. But in reality, it's like, no, we need to make ourselves better in order for these individuals to see that we're walking the walk and not just talking the talk. So I think, as much as this large macro conversation, it really does start with just the individual being able to show the qualities that they want within the organization.
Yeah. And I think that's the matchup, going from that macro then into the micro, because people get lost in that. And I always start with, if you want to be a better leader, start by being a better teammate, because so often we're so detached from it. So the thing is, we need to reconnect to it. And I love that idea I look at the questions people ask, so that anything to add question or replacing it with what you've said or something along those lines, it shifts people immediately. I just wrote an article that came out, and it was about these sort of questions. And one of the things that I picked up was everyone was sort of saying, does that make sense in a meeting? And it's one of the most fear-inducing questions you can ever ask in front of a team. And I advise people never to do it, because the minute you do, everyone shuts up because they're then judging themselves. They're not thinking about what they got to say. It's just this whole cycle that people never see because the pattern's there. So instead of that, we talk about, instead of does that make sense, is have I explained that clearly? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can say I don't get it, or it's not the end of the world if I put my hand up here and people aren't going to look at me like I'm a fool. It's like I'm saying that you didn't explain it right, which makes them feel better. And I think as a leader, at least you've got to be able to do is be vulnerable enough to say that and accept it.
Well, that's, again, going back to these ideas of the feminine versus the masculine traits. Vulnerability is a huge one for the feminine, and being able to be in front of a room, and rather than say, do you have anything to add, but saying, I would love to add something, and it would be really meaningful to me for everyone to have a closure where we just share our whatever you want to share, but whatever you've felt during this experience. And I'm going to go first. And so then as a leader, you're being able to show a sample of what you're looking for in terms of, again, and if you're vulnerable and you're willing to put yourself on the line, it's much easier for people to then say, oh, like, I don't have to just say something to prove myself. I can just say whatever, and I'm going to be accepted because this person who is the leader is showing me that that's okay. So I think that's a crucial aspect of kind of the right question is also the right leading and the right answer.
Yeah, and I think it can be as simple as that to make those shifts. I mean, we look to these whole things, and we'll talk about, I'm going to move into holacracy in about a second, but we look to that and we'll hear the word holacracy, and then all of a sudden we've got to make it something huge in our minds. But if we took a practice like a question or doing a 10,000 steps or something like that we can control and we can easily understand and do, we can just get just as much shift in a shorter period of time while we work on some of this real macro stuff and these ideas.
Yes. Like Headspace is an amazing app. I do a specific meditation, but I always recommend, Headspace to people, or even just, again, watching TED Talks, or, even reading some type of leadership books that allow for you to feel like you're doing work on yourself. And that's something too, that again, we're just constantly a organization that's focused on learning. And, we have a free Skillshare account, and we allow for individuals, if they do want to learn, to bring up whatever classes they want to take, and then we'll pay for them. And it's just something that is really important. Is I think that when you start to look at things as learning, you don't feel like you always have to be perfect all the time, and you have space to grow. And I think that really is the point of having a safe work environment, or safe anything environment, to feel like, again, wherever you are is okay, and you're willing to do the work to get to that next level.
Yeah, agreed. And I do love Headspace too. I think it's fantastic.
It's great.
I think it's fantastic.
Great.
So I'm mindful of the time here, Amanda, and it's racing by, but I'm loving this. But I do want to dive in a little bit to holacracy, because as I mentioned at the top, I did hear you speak on Rich Roll. I think you were just sort of getting into holacracy at that time. That was around 3 years ago, I think. But
yep.
So I'm interested, if we can, in how you take however long. I'm going to hand the floor over to you, but just where a holacracy came from in your experience in the story, and where you sort of started with it to where it's taken you now. I mean, you've spoken a lot about it so far, but just to give people a snapshot of that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, and I simplify it dramatically. So I just say holacracy, in a startup or in many companies, but I use a startup as an example because it's easy to digest. Most people wear many hats. And so even if you're hired for a specific position, you're usually doing way more positions than the role that you were hired for, but you're not actually getting the credit for it. And it might be taking away from the position that you were actually hired for. And so in that regard, the way to really kind of think about holacracy is that it's all based on roles and accountabilities as opposed to titles. And so any given person can have 5, 10, 15 roles based on the work they're doing. And there's a platform called Glassfrog that manages all those roles. So in one place, every single person in the entire organization's roles are actually there. And you could see what people are doing within the organization. So there's transparency and clarity. And then the way holacracy works is it's based on these tactical meetings every single week, where you actually bring up items that you want to triage, and you talk about how to move that forward. And so we actually got through 50 items in 2 hours, and it comes up with a full system. This is also Glassfrog, but it says, okay, what's the next step? How do we move this forward? So rather than just reporting on a client that you're working on, it actually allows for you to come up with a next action, which, by the way, completely changes the psychology of the organization, to be able to constantly be thinking, how do I move this forward? How do I move this forward? So that's the tactical piece. And then the governance piece is, as I mentioned before, anyone in the organization, and larger companies they're kind of built around circles. In our case, we only have, one major circle. Mm-hmm. But I just say circles are like departments. But within the circle, governance happens, and individuals can propose a new role or a new policy based on what they feel is attention. And so an example could be the website isn't getting regularly updated. I want to create a role that's website, designer and manager. And that role then everyone in the circle gets to ask questions. Then everyone in the circle gets to give their opinion. They could give an opinion of anything. And then everyone in the circle gets to kind of vote it in. And so at any given point in time, those happen usually once a month, the organization is changing. And I think with holacracy, though, over the past few years, I think everyone has to do it in their own way. For us, we have titles to the outward facing world because it's just difficult for people. If I wrote like 25 different roles in my subject, it would be very confusing.
Yeah.
So we have titles, and we have, internally, I think that we fairly work within a holocratic structure, but there's probably certain things that I think we do that might be more traditional than the full holacracy. There's a whole constitution, and you have to go by it, and again, so you have to take it as you want to take it. But the findings that have really helped me is, the first one is this idea of moving things forward. So making sure that when you're in a meeting and you're bringing something up, really recognizing that next question, which is how do we move this forward, and that transforms the way that we meet with each other. And it also transforms the way that the empowering, element of each individual feeling like they have a say in moving the organization forward. The second is this idea that when someone wants to leave the organization, since we've started Holacracy, we have not had to let anyone go. And actually the people that have transitioned out of Catalyst, it's been really positive. And and usually that's extremely difficult to maintain positive relationships with people after they leave the organization. But with Holacracy, usually when people are ready to leave, they see that they don't really have many roles that they're filling anymore. And it just doesn't make sense to be working in the organization. And so they transition out, and then we know what roles they filled, and we can pass those off to someone else. And so that's a huge change in terms of culture, in terms of being able to allow for people to grow outside of the organization and to make room for people that are right for the organization based on the roles that we have. And then the third would be the fact that it's malleable, flexible, and really allowing for the organization to kind of have this, experience of its own, in the fact that when new people come in, they might have completely new roles to bring to the table. And you would never know that otherwise. If you're hiring someone for a head of marketing, but they also really want to help with design, you actually usually don't know that until maybe 2 years in the organization when it's too late. And so this immediately gets people to start thinking, okay, what are the roles that you want to fill? Okay, you can add that. Sure, you can try that. And it's all around this with Holacracy. It's safe enough to try. And so it's this idea that, taking risks is okay. And being able to try new things is okay. And then in another month, you could always change it from there. So I think those are those three high level lessons that simplifying Holacracy as much as I can.
Yeah, no, it sounds fantastic. And I think it speaks to that idea that, but as you said, no one leaves or people do leave. Either way, it's okay. But I think that speaks to the fact that it supports a culture that we've talked about through all of this and the whole this podcast and my work's based on. But what it does, I think, is it gives people the sense that you either belong here or you don't. You don't have to try and fit into a role. And there's that sense that you belong here, and if it feels right, you're going to have a contribution to make and something of value to add. But it's going to be so transparent in the culture that we're now going to have that if you don't feel like you belong, rather than saying, can you fit in, then it just sort of removes so much of that stuff to allow you to focus on that key question, which is how do we move this, being the whole organization, forward?
Yes, 100%. And also, how do I move forward? How do I really, grow as a person? And how do I not just fit into a box? And, we've had, and also because of the culture in terms of anyone can work from anywhere, I started the company with my best friend, as I mentioned, and he has lived in New York, Atlanta, Singapore, Chicago. He's been all over the world in terms of where he's lived. And when he goes somewhere else, we say okay, how can we make this work? How can we support you? And I think that's very rare. And I was actually having a conversation with a friend of mine around how companies usually, in the services industry, it's really important to be so super client focused. And I think we are extremely client focused, and I go above and beyond. I think we all go above and beyond to really provide a service to our partners and clients, but it's really employee focused. And I think that will set us apart from other companies and other agencies, because agencies so often are just built to sell. And they build really fast, and they work with a bunch of clients, and then they get acquired by another larger agency, and then they work with 40 other agencies. And I really feel that for us, we are building an organization where people feel proud to come to work and feel like they are heard and they are seen, and they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And that's something that I think is rare for any industry, but for the agency world particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that everyone looks for in the work that they do, because what you're doing there is giving them that sense of purpose. But not only are you giving them a sense of purpose, but you're making it okay for it to be important for them on their level, as opposed to saying, well, here again, it's this idea, well, here's the culture, this is the way you should think, this is the way we want you to act, and this is sort of where we're at. Can you fit in with it? You're sort of saying, hey, come along, this is the way we do it here. But in that comes a whole lot of stuff, which is whatever your purpose is for coming to work is your purpose, and that's really cool too, as long as it's important to you. And then there's that sense of responsibility. With that comes the idea, well, guys, for this to work, you're going to have to take responsibility, because if you're not willing to do that, then this thing doesn't get off the ground. Everyone's got to flap their wings, for a sort of a clumsy metaphor.
Exactly. And that's, I have had situations in the past, because we have a lot of young people within kind of our ecosystem. And I have had conversations where someone I have found would be complaining, and it would be very negative. And I would have conversations and say, what do you want to do about it? Like, you have the authority to make a difference. Like, you don't have to be complaining, because you actually have the opportunity to make a change. And I think that's really hard for people. And we've also, sent individuals to personal development. And again, it's really what each person wants. And it varies, but I think again, this culture has been developed and designed by the people that work for the company. So this isn't something that in any way, shape, or form I'm saying this is what we have to do. It's really each individual saying, like, this is what I think we should be doing. And I just wouldn't want it any other way, because the people that work at Catalyst are Catalyst. It's a very specific industry. And, without these individuals, the company wouldn't be where it was or where it will be. So, yeah. Yeah.
And I think that just speaks so much to everything that this show's about. So for giving us that real life on the ground sort of experience and the impact of that too. That's just been so valuable, I think, for the listeners. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Of course.
And I think at this point, I mean, you and I have talked through this at a million miles an hour. There's so much in this, and people will want to listen to it over and over to get the benefit out of it, which is great. So I think rather than cram them in with any more sort of stuff for them to think about, are you up for doing the Barnraisers top 10?
Sure.
All right. So let's shoot. Question number 1. What is the thing you feel must be present or created in order for a team to succeed?
Trust and honesty.
Fantastic. Number 2. What is one thing you feel must be avoided or overcome in order for a team to succeed?
Ego.
Brilliant. Number 3. What team, current or historic, would you love to have been a member of?
I think I would love and have hated working for Steve Jobs, but it would have been really an honor to kind of learn from such a creative genius.
Yeah, it would have been a hell of a ride, wouldn't it?
Yes.
All right, number 4. Who is an ultimate team player in your eyes and why?
I think that an ultimate team player, that's a really interesting question. Is it from just like the team that I work on, or a team in the world?
Anyone that you see in the world that you think's the ultimate team player, and why is that?
I think that I used to be obsessed with the Nets, and they're not the best basketball team, but there was a team of them, and I guess I'll say it's not necessarily one person, but during this time, it was these 5 players. It was Lucius Harris, Kenyon Martin, Richard Jefferson, and I forgot the other one. I apologize. But they were one of the most incredible teams that I've ever seen in my entire life. And the way that they all worked together was unbelievable. And Jason Kidd and Kenyon Martin had this completely amazing experience where Kenyon Martin would go up and throw the basketball and it would alley-oop off of the hoop, and Jason Kidd would be able to really just like slam it in and slam dunk it. And it was so inspiring to me. I played basketball for a large part of my life, to really learn from these experts and teams. So if I had to say Kenyon Martin, I will say as one person.
Fantastic. And just out of interest, I'm part of a basketball mad community. So awesome. what era are we talking about there? What year was that?
Let me think. So it must have been 10 years ago.
Right.
It was when Lucius Harris had a mask because he had surgery, and everyone would kind of scream Lucius, and it was like this like huge. I just remember they still didn't win often, but it wasn't really about that for me. It was really about being a part of the team and watching these individuals just interact with each other was pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I'll definitely look that up and pass that on. Okay, back to the questions, because otherwise we're going to get onto a whole other topic. We might talk about that after this.
Sure.
Question number 5. What 3 qualities make someone a great teammate or colleague?
I would say really, I guess emotional intelligence would be one major one. The other one would be compassion. So recognizing where other people are. And then the third would be perspective. So being able to jump into different people's perspective, but also have the perspective of that individual within the organization, as well as be able to have perspective of the future.
Fantastic. All right, number 6. And this will be very interesting given what we've talked about. What 3 qualities make someone a great coach or manager?
I think for that, it's really, I guess, being able to not make it about you. So being in a position where, and I'm trying to think of the actual one word for this, but really kind of taking yourself out of it. So I guess egoless, if you will, like not making it about you in any capacity, really having it be of service. So that's the first one, being of service to the individual that you're working with. The second one is humble. So recognizing that it's not all around you and that you don't always have the answers. And then the third is, a learner. So I think the best leaders and coaches are also the best learners, and that they don't always think that, that they're the teacher within the room, and that they also can be learning while they're teaching.
Fantastic. Number 7, what is one thing that instantly makes you feel part of a team?
I think, I guess even something random, but humor, like being able to have a shared sense of fun, and really be able to laugh and be able to feel connected as human beings, as opposed to just connected around the work. So that would be one, is just being able to laugh with each other.
Love that. That's really cool. I don't think we've had that answer yet. So that's awesome. Number 8, what's one thing that instantly makes you feel excluded from a team?
Competition. I am fairly competitive, so I try to be mainly focused on competition with myself, and really steer clear from competing with other individuals, because I don't think it's productive, even though I understand that, there's places to compete, like if you're a professional basketball player.
Yeah.
But in a team, I really feel like it's important that you see yourself as a part of a whole. And so the second that I feel like an unhealthy sense of competition, just like someone wanting to be the best just for the best sake and not for the team's sake, it really turns me off.
Yep. Understand. Number 9, what is your fondest team memory?
I think that we were in Georgia. I actually gave a commencement speech at Brenau University because of my business partner. He got me that opportunity, and we were all at this like really funny, weird bar that played like 90s music and just really fun dance music. And we were all dancing and laughing and having a really good time with each other. And it just felt really good and we've had a few of those moments, but it felt really good to just be able to, again, be myself within this team environment where we work so hard, and we're always just constantly kind of working with each other towards these larger than life kind of problems. Just be able to kind of let loose and be myself.
Fantastic. And number 10, what is one thing you'd like to hear a coach, manager, boss, or teammate say about you?
I would like for them to say that I am, I think, really a team player, and that I am really in it for the growth and the best possible outcome for each and every individual, and that I go above and beyond to make sure that everyone feels like they are a part of the team and feel included and feel like they have a say in a role. So, yeah. Fantastic.
And I bet they're saying that anyway.
I hope so. We'll have to ask them.
Go into the next meeting and say, I've got a question.
I will.
That's great. So that's the top 10. How was that? Not too hard?
No, it was harder than I thought, because but those were great questions.
Great. I'm glad you liked it. And Amanda, now before we do wrap up, I do have to ask, if people want to get in contact with you or Catalyst and things like that, where do we find you? Because I know where you are, but our listeners may not, but please, where can we find you, and how would you like to be contacted?
I love LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Amanda Slavin. You can find me on all other social media platforms as AJ Slavin, Instagram, Facebook, the whole thing. And then you can find us on our website, which is CatalystCreativ, no E at the end.com.
The new website too.
Yes, a brand new website kind of showing all the work that we've done with our tremendous clients over the past 5 years.
It looks fantastic too. It's well worth just checking out, even if you don't know what to ask Amanda, go and check it out because it's really cool. Thank
you so much.
So Amanda, on that note, again, so much valuable information in there and so much of it speaking to exactly what the ethos of this podcast is about. So for all that and for sharing so openly and just being so fantastic, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Well, how was that? Talking to Amanda, it's impossible not to feel inspired and humbled at the same time. Her passion for her work, the love of her team, and care for her clients is always on display. But I think more importantly, her commitment to living as authentically as possible and making sure she walks her talk is what is most impressive. It's one thing to align yourself or aspire to become more positive, to try to do your best. We all do that to some extent, but very few of us take the sort of steps Amanda has to ensure that her vision for her life and her reality actually match up. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I really hope you did too. Now, of course, if you want to catch up or get in touch with Amanda or learn more about CatalystCreativ, head on over to www.CatalystCreativ, without an E on the end, .com. And you can also find Amanda on LinkedIn or follow her on social media. Just search for AJ Slavin on the platform of your choice. And of course, those links and also some information on holacracy, the methodology that Amanda's based her business on, are also included in the show notes accompanying this episode. Now, before we wrap up for another show, I want to tell you about a live webinar that I'm doing on Thursday at 3 p.m. on the 15th of March, PST time. So for those of you playing along in my neck of the woods in Melbourne or Sydney, Australia, that time is Friday, 10 a.m. on the 16th of March. Of course, this webinar is part of the work that I do with my team training company, Shifting Peers. I've called the session the 5 Steps to Building an Unbeatable Team Culture. And it's been created especially for business leaders and owners who are looking to make a shift for the better with their team. So if you've got a goal or a desire to improve the culture in your business, then head on over to www.discovertheupside.com. There you can learn more about what we're going to be talking about and what I'll be sharing, and you can also reserve your spot. Again, I want to stress this is a live webinar. It's not canned, and I also love to take questions at the end and dive into some other topics. So please jump on to discovertheupside.com and register your spot. Also, I'm in the process of upping my online networking and social media game. So please, if you want to get in touch with me to talk teams, or maybe you'd like to have me come and speak to your organisation, community or sporting team, if you do, then please reach out on LinkedIn and let me know how I might be of contribution. Of course, if you liked this episode, and I know you did, otherwise you wouldn't still be listening, then please share it with your friends. Tell them directly. Share your love for Barnraisers on social media and let people know that this sort of resource exists. And if you haven't got us hooked up on social media, please jump on and add us. On Instagram, you can find me at Dan J. Stones, and you'll find the podcast on Facebook by searching for Barnraisers or using the handle at BarnraisersPod. I think that's about it for now. It's great to be back. Thanks for listening. I'm Dan Stones. This has been Barnraisers. And until next time, remember, the biggest trap a team can make is thinking that responsibility is something to be shared amongst the group. It's not. The truth is, responsibility is always a personal choice. No one can make or give you responsibility for anything. It's an agreement you have to make with yourself. Bye for now.